Yeah, I think we're moving. We need to move much more, but it's
Mhm.
better. It's a whole lot better than it was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We need to move.
Understood. Well, speaking of which, man, I am on and we're live now. So welcome everybody to the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. My name is Mark Ross and I'm your host. And with me tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I have with me Mr. Robert Miranda. He is an advocate for the city of Milwaukee, and he does a lot of advocacy towards the water pipes problem that we have within the city. Uh, I know that there's other things that you do. So real quick, Brother Miranda, man, why don't you go into what else you do besides get on everybody's nerves about this lead pipe problem, man?
Well, yeah, there are a number of things. I like getting involved in a lot of veteran issues. I do some stuff with the veterans. I hang
Yes,
out with the VA over there and
simplify, brother, simplify. Yes, indeed.
Simplify, and so I do work with the veterans. I also volunteer some time helping out with food issues and water issues and I join in on discussions with other efforts that deal with freedom and democracy issues. So
Mm,
yeah, it's very humbling and
indeed.
sometimes very lively.
So you're putting in that work.
Yeah, every now and then. But the water issue and the lead pipes and stuff is my passion, and that's where I'm focusing.
Sir. Yes, sir. And speaking of which, Brother Miranda, let's get into that. You know, there's been this issue of lead pipes within the city of Milwaukee, and apparently it's been going on for a while.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And I know we had this phone conversation about it that led to this, but talk about the history of, if you can, of the lead pipe problem.
Yeah. Well, I would recommend for your audience, there is a book on this that really gives a lot of insight, a lot of information, science-based, historical-based, political, everything you need to know about how this all started, around the nation. And the book is called The Great Lead Pipe Disaster. The Great Lead Pipe Disaster. And I'm just going to mention his first name, Warren, because I don't want to tear up his last name. but
Yeah.
The Great Lead Pipe Disaster is a great book to get you started on how all of this has come about and why today this is a very, very serious health concern for not only Milwaukee but for the country. Um, to begin with, we can basically track the history of lead all the way to the days of Rome. Um, Rome used to use a lot of lead in a lot of things that they did. I mean, from using it to build things, pots, stuff like that, to using it to uh, distribute water. Rome gave us a warning back then after they found out that lead has helped to undermine the development of their empire. Uh, a lot of that can be researched by simply pulling up Roman lead, Google, and you'll see all the studies, all the works on how Rome, and some say lead may have caused the fall of Rome because of how toxic and how much it has messed up the minds of human beings. Um, Fast forward a little bit, and we come to the 1800s when America is developing, and it's developing, it's starting to grow these cities. And before lead, actually, water mains and water distribution was being done by using wood. They used to carve in the wood and then wrap it around with steel, and then that would be the way they would distribute water. It wasn't until about the 1840s that we saw around the country, this turn to lead to begin the process of distributing water to homes. In Milwaukee, which we would be focusing on today, that trend started in about between 1840 and kicked off in 1870. In 1840, a few houses began to turn to lead, and in 1872, uh, the Common Council of Milwaukee and developed and put together the Milwaukee Water Works. And the Milwaukee Water Works was created. And in the Milwaukee Water Works brochures and documents, which I reviewed in the City Hall archives, the documents show that anyone who wanted to connect their lines from the house to the water mains had to use lead pipes. That was a mandate by the city that homes that were just being built and connecting to the city's water system, the water mains are, let's make it sure, water mains are different, lead service lines are different. The
Okay.
water mains are the water mains that go up the middle of the street. They have a diameter, in some cases, of 4 inches, where lead service lines can range from 1 to about 2 inches. And so when the
I think we're having some technical difficulties. So hopefully Brother Robert can get back on at some point. But at any rate, he was talking about the history of the water pipes within the city of Milwaukee, and the problem that went along with that was that he was talking that the pipes were lead based. There he is.
Sorry about that. I don't know what
you good.
there was somebody who tried to call in, and then I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. But anyway, getting to where I was.
Yes.
So
1872.
Right, 1872, they called for the homes to be connecting from the water mains, which mostly were made of cast iron, and they connect to the water mains to the house. And so from 1872 till about 1950, around there, that's all we were connecting to. You know, the homes that were being built were connecting with lead service lines. It wasn't until about 1962 that Milwaukee, on its own fruition, decided that they would ban the use of lead pipes to be connecting from homes to the water mains. So actually, Milwaukee was ahead of a lot of cities, because after they banned it in 1962, it wasn't until about 1986 that the United States government banned the use of lead pipes. Almost 10 years after they banned lead being in paint, which was banned in 1978. Now, in 1974, the United States Congress passed the Safe Water Act. There are actually two acts. One is a Clean Water Act. The other one is a Safe Water Act. Okay. And the Clean Water Act dealt specifically with like rivers, creeks, lakes, protecting the environment there. Obviously, because if you remember back in the day, people used to find lakes on fire, streams on fire, water catching on fire because all the chemicals that were being dumped into the water. Okay. And so they had to pass the Clean Water Act.
Got it.
It wasn't a while until they realized, because of all the lead pipes that were underground and servicing homes with water from the municipalities, that they realized that these pipes were leaching lead in the water, so they created the Safe Water Act. And that was where we regulate the safety of the drinking and cooking water. They realized that they needed to strengthen that regulation. So in 1991, this thing called the lead copper rule was invented to be augmented with the Safe Water Act. And basically, the lead copper rule specifically focused on what municipalities should do when they come into a situation where lead and water surpassed the recommended acceptable levels,
Hmm.
which
What's
I
the
find
acceptable level? Yeah,
uh,
yeah. What's past the acceptable level?
right, exactly, which I find is very contradictory because
Yeah,
on the one hand, the CDC says zero is the
right, right.
exactly. You know, everybody else says there's no safe level in lead,
Right. How about that?
but the EPA says, oh well, you know, we have a level that we can use to.
Right.
So you know, so it
Point
confuses
zero
the
zero
public.
two percent. I mean,
Right,
come
right,
on,
right.
man.
Yeah. So before that, they used to have all these crazy numbers, and they used to measure lead in water these things called parts per billion. And so back before the 1991 lead copper rule, they used to see homes that would have water that would come in and be tainted to up to 70, 80, 90 parts per billion. You know, dangerous levels, crazy levels, death-causing levels for children, you know. And so the 1991 rule came in and they said, well, we'll just go ahead and put it at about 15 parts per billion. We've been working with 15 parts per billion for many, many years. Um, they've revised the lead copper rule a few times, but never to the point where it needs to be. As a matter of fact, they just revised it again, and the EPA released it in October of 2024, which is much more of an improvement than what it was, but it still regulates that the action level for municipalities and water utilities to conduct testing and all the other things they need to do. Instead of being 15, they lowered it down to 10, which is still contradictory and crazy.
Yeah.
Um, we we obviously push for zero, as the health science says. But if we can't go there, we also recommend what the American Pediatrics Academy recommends, and they say if you're going to go ahead and have a level put in lead and water, they recommend one, which is, you know, much far better than what we are currently working with right now. The other issue in regards to that, which the current LCRI lead copper rule improvement that was passed and put in effect in October of 2024, is that fact that the EPA, for the first time in all these years, finally recognized that the parts per billion number is really a number that somebody pull out their butt. It's not a health science based number. There's no research. There's no one out there who has put a big peer reviewed study on this and said, yeah, the parts per billion recommendation is a health benefit or some. There's nothing like that. It's just a bureaucratic number that was put out there so that municipalities and water utilities didn't have to pay the kind of money they had to pay in order to remove this toxin from our water supply.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have been for the last couple of years now advocating that the city of Milwaukee should ignore what the EPA recommendations are and either go with the zero level as the CDC, and the EPA also contradicts itself by going with the CDC, or go with the American Pediatrics Academy's 1 part per billion. So that's a big fight to get out into the community, because we all know how damaging lead can be to the body. It affects the body in all various different ways.
Yeah.
But most concerning to us is how lead can impact women of childbearing years. Um, this is a very, very serious topic for us to engage in, and that the whole community should be really aware of. Because, women of childbearing years, if they're not testing their blood, and actually the CDC says that anything over 3.5 micrograms per deciliter of lead in your blood is hazard to your health and hazard to everything that goes on. Again, we should be at 0, but CDC says 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. Anything higher than that is just dangerous, especially to children.
Right. You said
So
that, and I remember in that conversation we had, Brother Robert, that you said that along with the present danger of pregnant women consuming lead-based water, it's affecting the fetus,
right,
and the child will come out
right,
with lead.
right. What could occur and will occur is that if a mother isn't watching the lead level in her blood system, that could go to the fetus, and what could take place is a miscarriage, stillbirth, premature birth, development damage. All kinds of stuff can happen to that fetus. And then even if the baby is born and born okay, if the mother still has lead in her blood, if she's breastfeeding, she's endangering the baby. She's endangering the life of the child when she's breastfeeding, because that lead still can go from her breast to the baby still. So it is just a very insidious neurotoxin that we have to really focus our attention on and push our governments to really remove this. And it's an easy toxin to remove from the environment. If you think back in the day when they started finding out that lead in gasoline was harming the community, was destroying civilization because of the lead that was being released into the air from the gasoline. They found out how dangerous this was, and that's why they removed the lead from gasoline. That's why we have no lead in gasoline today. Again, this situation with the water is complicated, but of the same kind of health hazard magnitude. See, lead in water is a very tricky thing, because a lot of the people who support the water utilities and governments' role and actions to not be aggressive about removing this say that lead in water is not as toxin or not as dangerous as lead paint, soil, and dust, which is absolutely poppycock, because it doesn't matter where lead is coming from, it's still lead.
Still
Lead
lead.
is,
Yeah.
it's so this idea that, oh, we're not too concerned with the lead in water because lead in water is not as hazardous as dust or paint is crazy. Is stuff that thankfully in the last 10 years I've been seeing not as repeated as it was when I first started 10 years ago. But it is a danger. And so the problem why people don't take it so seriously in a lot of governments and water utilities is because, you know, lead and dust, the ubiquity of lead and dust is there constant, right? Dust goes into the ground. It's easy to detect. It's easy to see. People pick it up. The problem with trying to find lead in the water is that there are two ways lead gets in the water. One is through a soluble method, and soluble meaning like sugar and water. It basically becomes part of the water, and that's what happens when it leaches from the pipe. It goes into the water as it sits there and becomes part of the water, and you don't see it. One of the recommendations that they make is that if you want to get rid of that lead, you just go ahead and flush the water system. Again, that is not recommended by us because the Louisiana State University Public Health School did a peer-reviewed research on flushing, and they say that it would be more problematic to do that.
Because where would the lead go? I mean, if you flush the system.
Right. Well, you flush the system, you get rid of the soluble lead, but the problem is that as you're running the water, it tends to release the particles in the pipe. And so these tiny particles, being very microscopic, you can't see it, ends up going into the water. And when that happens, tiny piece of particle can raise the part per billion number from 15 to almost 300. Because in these tiny bits of pieces of particle, there's so much lead, so densely in that piece of particle, that one little piece can cause the water system to go crazy. And if a child drinks that's under 1 year old, you're threatening that child's life. You know, case in point, I use Washington D.C. as an example. Back in 2003, 2004, Washington D.C. started experiencing huge infant mortality rate explosion, and nobody seemed to understand what was going on. And finally, some professors came down to DC, did a lot of research, did a lot of testing, did a lot of studies, focused on the water, and found that because DC changed its chemistry of the water that dealt with making sure that the system was free of bio problems and stuff like that, it actually destroyed this compound called orthophosphate that is put in the water and that is designed to coat the pipes and provide a layer of this invisible kind of coating that is designed to slow or reduce the corrosion of the pipe. Because corrosion is a big contributor to the leaching of lead in water. And so when they went ahead and put that chemical, what they did was remove the chlorine that they were using and then mixed it with chlorine ammonia and came up with this chemical called chloramine. So when they put that chloramine into the water, that then uh, dissipated the orthophosphate from the pipes. The pipes were left unprotected. The corrosion process immediately sped up. A lot of lead was leaching, thus causing the infant mortality rates that DC experienced. So it's a man-made kind of problem. Another man-made kind of problem is what we saw in Flint, and Flint was a big disaster as well. All they did, yep, all they did was switch the water from Huron and started using the Flint River water, and didn't realize that the acidity levels of Flint River water would also cause the removal of the orthophosphate they were using in those pipes. So, this is an issue that needs to be really dealt with seriously because, there are man-made concerns that could cause major catastrophic issues for the population. And there are natural catastrophic issues that could harm the population. And, one of the ways that an entire city can be harmed that has huge numbers of pipes is if an earthquake happens to take place in that area, rattling of the pipes begin. And when these pipes shake, a lot of the corrosion, a lot of the minerals, a lot of the materials that are in those pipes start to release into the water. That means a lot of that stuff is all tainted with lead, gets into the water system. And the water is just completely polluted with lead after that.
And people are drinking it.
And people drink it,
And speaking of Flint, brother, let's try to correlate Flint and Milwaukee, because although Flint had all that publicity, you know, everybody was just in an uproar about how jacked up Flint was, but we're not that far behind.
No.
How many homes do you guesstimate are affected by this lead water issue?
We know we have about between 60 to 65,000 today that have lead lateral problems, but there are also homes that do not have lead service lines, but have lead pipes in the house.
Okay.
And so those numbers can range from 70 to 90,000. So, you know, it is a real important for people to begin researching and understanding what this toxin, the danger this toxin presents to their family, so that they can start implementing for their families precautionary measures on how to use the water if their homes have lead pipes in them. This is not to say that the entire water system, for example, of Milwaukee Waterworks or the municipality, is tainted with lead. No. What our focus is that homes that have lead as the service line that distributes the water that comes from the water mains to their house, if those pipes are all made of lead, you have danger, danger, danger.
Yes.
As the robot from Lost in Space would say.
Danger Will Roberts.
Exactly.
Man, and with the city of Milwaukee, do you know, to your knowledge, do you know the amount of work, like real work, they did in order to help alleviate that problem?
That's a good question. Here's an interesting thing. When we started advocating on this stuff back in 2015, we were making news and we were really starting to get traction politically as well as interest from the media. And so because now it was becoming an issue and people were talking about it in Milwaukee, the president of Marquette University decided to host a symposium on the water to address this issue, to see what the mayor of Milwaukee at the time, Barrett, and his team would say as far as the safety of the water. Well, how safe is the water? And so they held this symposium in September of 2016. And the keynote speaker for the symposium was this Dr. Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech University. And he was the one who not only found out what was going on in Flint and did the study and alerted the public that this situation in Flint is caused by what would happen with the change of the water source. But he also was the one who found out about the stuff that happened in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, his life work has been around testing lead pipes and stuff like that. So when he came to the Marquette University Symposium to speak about this, he got up and in his presentation, what really struck me is that the first PowerPoint that he put up on the wall was a big statement that said, Milwaukee historically has been a world leader in covering up lead and water problems. Imagine that. The mayor, all of the major leaders of the city, about 700 people were attending this symposium. And you look up at the PowerPoint of your keynote speaker, and the first thing you see is this statement made by this keynote speaker, respected around the country for his work, saying, Milwaukee historically has been a world leader in covering up lead and water problems. And that was 10 years ago.
So what do you say to that, man? What do you say to that?
Exactly. And, all you could do is look at the mayor and see that his red got beet red. His face
Hmm.
got beet red, you
Hmm.
know, when he saw that.
Yeah.
And you know, and you know, they gave their presentation, their seminar, and you know, uh, that's when the whole remember when the whole filter issue came up, and so that's when they started distributing filters at the time, if
Yeah.
you recall,
Right.
because of after that symposium, that's when it was let out that well, you know, the water isn't as safe as the city was trying to say it was,
Mm.
especially when it talks about lead in the water.
Mm.
So after that symposium, the community started becoming more alert and more suspicious about what was happening and what was going on. Uh, we then started advocating about having the city not only push for more filters, but also for the city to put together a resolution calling for the mandate or moratorium of doing what they were doing at the time was partial lead lateral removal. In other words, because the city sees lead service lines as a private public thing, where on the private side, the responsibility of the pipe was the homeowner's responsibility to remove the pipe, and the part that was on the other side of the curb was the public and the city's responsibility. The city would remove their
Man.
part of the pipe, leaving the other part intact. But the problem with that is that nobody was aware and told that when the city messed around with their side, it jostled and disturbed the pipe, and all that lead was going into the water, poisoning people.
Mm.
So we pushed for a mandate or a moratorium, and the resolution was passed. And from 2016 on, we haven't been doing partial lead lateral removals anymore, which was a pretty significant big victory for us in the beginning there.
Right. 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 I can't imagine how many people got sick, went to the hospital, and they probably got diagnosed with some other stuff,
Sure.
not knowing that the root cause of their ailments came from this.
Exactly. Yeah, and there is a prominent professor out of Simon Fraser University. His name is Dr. Bruce Lanphier, who specializes his work for over 50 years has been on lead effect on the body. And there is a lot of studies that
Yeah.
he has produced that are peer reviewed. And his latest release was about 4 or 5 years ago, long term study that showed that lead is a major contributor in heart disease and can cause heart problems, heart failure, and things like that. Which, you know, many of us who are older will say, I'm having these kinds of issues because of age. When in fact, a lot of these issues could have been because you have been drinking this water consistently and having this lead in your body, and you never knew that you were poisoning yourself,
Hmm.
harming yourself, and causing your life expectancy to go down instead of keeping your health healthy, keeping yourself healthy, and for your life expectancy to keep going up. Yeah, it's crazy, and but you know, there's always someone out there trying to prevent the good stuff, like removing lead from being removed from the water. And this someone in our case, actually the country's case, who always tends to try to stop the progress of succession is a major association called the American Waterworks Association, AWWA, which is a kind of national big lobby group for the water utilities. And they always try to find ways to get all the bad talk away from water and try to focus on the good stuff, and they are now in their campaign trying to dismiss the changes that were recently made by the lead copper rule improvement that was released in October of 2024 by taking the EPA to court because they just don't like the way the LCRI that is now released in new version is written. And so, basically what they're doing is trying again, once again, protect the water utilities from accountability and the municipalities from accountability because, again, we always hear lead paint, soil, and dust because there's a boogeyman we could point to, and that was the lead paint industry, right? The lead paint industry put this in the paint, and they're the ones who poisoned us. So they should be held responsible, so we should sue them and then get the money for them to clean this up.
Right.
But when it comes to water, there's this big, let's keep it quiet because the liability falls on the government and the water utilities.
Right.
And it's like, no, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. So, so that's why when this current crisis that's going on with MPS,
yeah,
the testing and all the stuff that they found, the lead paint, soil, and dust were problems that they found. But they also found lead in the waters. And even though most of the MPS buildings, if not all, do not have lead service lines connecting to the water main, there's still lead pipes in the building, that are in the walls of the building and distributing water.
Yes.
So they did find lead in the water. And so, it's like, okay, where is it coming from? Well, it's coming from these pipes. And in some cases, most of the bubblers in most of the schools had filters, but the problem is that the filters weren't being maintained right, and in some cases weren't even changed at all. And the other thing is that they didn't have filters in sinks and taps in the kitchen and taps in the bathrooms.
Yeah.
And, it's like, wait a minute. I mean, kids go fill their water bottles in some of these sinks in those bathrooms. I mean,
do that back in the day. Yeah.
We used to do that back in the day, and they still do it today.
Yeah.
But, it just, so, now there's big discussions on what we're going to do to try to create a safe kind of environment. But, it's just, to me, irks me because they have known this. They have known all this. They know that this is a problem. They know that this is an issue. They know that this has been causing sicknesses and problems and the health of this community and the health of these children. But they never take the initiative to really delve in and dig in and get rid of this until a crisis comes up.
Right. Right. And like you said earlier, they still tend to, dodge and weave and all this,
Right.
But and that reminds me of a question that somebody posted a question in the chat, Brother Robert, to you. The question is, how much will it cost the city to replace the pipes? And it was followed by another question that would take years. So how much would it cost?
Well, when the estimates first started coming in about 8-9 years ago on how much it would cost, they ranged as high as $11,000 to $12,000, depending on the length of the pipe.
Per home or
per home? Per
okay.
home. Yep.
Okay.
So per home, imagine at the time we had about 70,000 homes that we knew had lead pipes. So you look at at that time when they were looking at cost estimates between $11,000 and $12,000. Now that everything is moving forward, the estimates have gone down to between $5,000 to $8,000, depending again on the length of the pipes that need to be removed. Yeah. And so, as far as how many years, the estimate was that in some cases this would take at least 70 years. They were putting out there, City Hall was saying 70 years. But that's crazy. I mean, it can be done. And the mandate today now is that these pipes be removed within 10 years. 10 years.
Mhm.
Now, there is a provision in the EPA requirement to remove these pipes in 10 years, and that is cities that have an extreme number of pipes, like Chicago,
Yeah.
could have a little bit more time to remove the pipes.
Mm.
But, people say, oh, it's going to cost so much. It's going to cost so much. My point to that is this: the cost to our community, the cost to our country, the cost to our state, the cost to our economics far, far outweigh anything in regards to paying for this removal. I mean, to leave these things in place and just ignore it uh, continues to destroy generations after generations, because this stays in the body. Lead stays in the body. It doesn't go away. It'll
Right.
maybe go away after about 40 or 50 years. But if you continue to ingest this, like you do when you're drinking water and you're cooking with it, it stays in your body and it harms you. And for women, if it's still in your body
Mm.
and it goes to the fetus, and the fetus is born, and the
Yes.
baby, let's say the baby's fine and the baby is born, the lead is still in the baby,
Mm.
and that lead stays there.
Mhm.
And then you have a baby now, not only that has some lead in it, but then you're going to put it in an environment where it's now ingesting more lead.
Yeah.
And so the development of the human being under those circumstances, I mean, no wonder we have failing educational systems. No wonder we have so much crime in the streets. The behavioral and issues that come up, developmental issues that come up.
Yes, sir.
The Romans taught us that. That was a lesson that the Romans taught.
And here we are repeating it.
And here we are repeating it. And it's still because it costs too much.
Right.
So if it costs too much, why are we so foolish to just immediately surrender so that, I don't know, maybe the Chicago Bears can have a $5 billion stadium?
Imagine,
Imagine,
imagine that.
yeah. Right now,
Imagine that.
Right now, one of the big issues is here in Milwaukee, all this money being put into the Deer District, and what they want to do to develop the Deer District.
Mm, mm, mm.
In the next 18 months, the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County itself, the state of Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Entertainment Center, I believe, in the next 18 months are going to throw almost $280 million, so that they can have, pickleball facilities over there. They could have
Oh,
the Milwaukee Public Museum is moving from one spot now and moving in that district. They're investing this kind of money, huge amounts of money, to do this kind of stuff, but to protect the generations that are coming, to enhance the city's workforce, enhance the city's brain force, and enhance the city's image. We don't care about that health. We don't care about that future. All so that we could go ahead and have good times today.
right. But little do they know, they might be also drinking lead water.
Believe me, at the time when we first started, they probably didn't know. But I know for a fact that a lot of these people who are in power, who understands this issue much better, are taking the precautions they need to take. And so, it's a fight that we continue to do here, but it's a fight being watched around the country because, it wasn't a crisis that got us started. What got us started is we learned the science. We follow the science of this whole thing. Science is what's guiding us. Science is what's pointing us to the truth, helping us to form the arguments needed in order to push the policies from government that are needed to remove this toxin from the environment. You know, we continuously challenge statements that are being made that we know are misleading or misinformed or half truths, and to the well, by and large, most of the community that really don't understand the complexities of this issue, they could get away with that.
Yeah.
But when we catch them doing it, the first thing we do is hold our press conference and call them out and say, you know, this isn't gonna stand. What you just told the community isn't fact. It's misleading,
Yeah.
and that's the way we got to deal with this, because
Indeed.
these people aren't gonna change.
And speaking of that, Brother Robert, has there been anybody in our government, state government, local government, or whatever, that hears what you're saying and is willing to step out on good faith and do some work to help with this lead water problem?
There are a few, yes. There are some good elected officials that are out there really trying to push this matter. One thing I will agree with them, they have limitations, and the limitations of the fact that the government of the state is controlled by some very insidious types of peoples who do not see Milwaukee as a place where they should be putting money into. And so, you know, you have these people who call themselves Christians, and most of them are Republicans, talking about all of this need for civility and all the need for protecting children and protecting babies. And here's a great opportunity for them to do that in Milwaukee. And they're the ones who are out there blocking funding from coming to Milwaukee to remove this toxin. I'll agree with that argument. That is a legitimate argument when you have people up in Madison, mostly of the Republican Party, led by State Representative Loss, who do not understand not only the danger and the hazards that life here in Milwaukee faces from this, but take it upon themselves to do everything to undermine and stop efforts to remove this. You know, it's crazy, but you know, I also, and I, like I said, I agree with that kind of argument, but I also argue back that knowing we have this kind of challenge in Madison should not prevent us from taking initiatives on our own and develop our own means to try to fight this toxin from destroying our community. You know, and so maybe what we should do is internally here in Milwaukee, stop pushing 110% in development of Camelot, and Camelot is what I call downtown.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's cut back a little bit on what we're doing in Camelot,
Yeah,
and puts a little bit more money towards what we got to do to save families, protect neighborhoods, build up our schools, so that we can go ahead and try to improve things, so that hopefully when things in Madison do change, we can then get the support we need in order to move forward and build on top of what we built ourselves here in Milwaukee. You know, so unless the government of Milwaukee decides to take that kind of initiative, we're going to be starting from the basement. And the day when things in Madison do change, that's where we're going to be starting from. When years past, we could have been starting a little higher.
man.
And so Milwaukee city government needs to stop finger pointing and saying it's their fault, and start saying, yeah, we're going to do something about this ourselves, but we're also still going to blame them. But let's just not make this a one-way point the finger thing. We need to realize our city has responsibility to do what needs to be done to protect us as well.
Robert, I have a two-part question. What's in the city of Milwaukee, is it the city of Milwaukee as a whole that's dealing with the lead water pipe issue, or is it a particular segment of Milwaukee?
The
Number one.
the areas of most concern are areas that were first built up in Milwaukee. The north side of Milwaukee, parts of Bayview, Walker's Point area, uh, areas that were closer to the downtown areas. Those are where most of the lead pipes are at. That's where they're located. Things farther north or farther west, um, that's are built after 1962, do not have, or actually 1955.
Said 1950, yeah, and 55, yeah.
Yeah, those areas do not have any lead pipes because people started using mostly copper at that time. So parts of Milwaukee have a very serious issue of the lead pipes, and other parts of Milwaukee are not as affected. But again, it is a concern for a huge swath of the Black population and of the uh, brown Hispanic areas, and areas where lower class whites live.
Now, stop you right there. The second part of my question, and you already teeter on it. Milwaukee, as we know it, is the most populated city in the state of Wisconsin. But Milwaukee also has the highest number of Black and brown people.
Right.
So now that you just, let the cat out the bag, I'm going to ask you this question, brother. Do you think that there's a racially motivated motive as to why they're moving so slow or dodging and weaving, as we said earlier, about dealing with this problem? Because people out here getting sick. People are probably dying from this.
Right.
They don't even know it.
Right.
They're masking it as something else, but this is the root of the problem.
Right. Right.
Do you think that there is a racially motivated motive, i.e. Flint,
right,
to why Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, the county of Milwaukee, the governor, the government structures are really like twiddling their fingers on this issue?
Yeah, I think on that question, there's a twofold answer. And yes, there is a kind of pre-civil rights mentality up in Madison. And if you understand what I'm saying, pre-civil rights mentality,
Indeed.
you understand what that means, right?
Damn, brother.
So yeah, I think that there is that for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing is this is economics. I think that that's a big issue too. Because see, the Republican Party is all big on giving these tax breaks to the rich, and they need to give huge tax breaks to these folks because that's really where they're getting a lot of their money to stay in power from. And in order to stay in power, they got to give the rich all their money back from taxes. And so, so there's a twofold answer there. One, yeah, there is pre-civil rights mentality up in Madison. And two, economics play into this as well because they feel Milwaukee is requiring too much funding. And a lot of that funding that it requires could be tax cuts for the rich and powerful in this state. And if we can get a handle on those two, I think we'd be doing a little bit more better than we are today.
I think the city of Milwaukee is really leaning more towards image and looks versus quality of life.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's a corporate kind of culture that they're putting out there. Make the facade look great, make everything look beautiful, make everything look like it's running efficient, make everything look like it's running perfectly. But it's a corporation. It's a corporation. And private businesses, private corporations run and operate just as bad as government because they mask their prowess of invincibility by making sure the hedges are clean, are cut properly, the paint job is done perfectly, and there's no cracks in the cement. So you get this image that this is a perfect institution. You know, everything's running great, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
And man, and there's a lot of homes, fortunately, that were built after the 1950s, but there's still there's still paint in the water too in some of these homes.
there's still paint on the walls, yeah, or the lead paint in the walls, yep.
Right.
Yep. And
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Finish up. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to state that we're still dealing with this lead issue, not necessarily in the water, but we're dealing with it in our homes and on these walls.
Right.
And it's like we're getting hit from many different angles.
Right.
And people hear what we're saying. People hear they hear our complaints.
Right.
But they got one thumb in the ass and the other in their mouth, and it's like, well, there's only so much that I can do. I'm sure you've heard somebody say that.
Oh,
I'm sure you heard somebody say
that. we hear that kind of goofiness all the time. It just for me, it just it's like when someone comes up to me and says, I've been drinking this water all my life. And there ain't nothing wrong with me.
Ain't no wrong with me.
I'm fine. It's like they need to see somebody walking around retarded for them to be convinced that the water is played a life change in that person's life. And it's not that way. No, you don't have to look like you're mentally challenged. Okay. You don't have to have that look. You don't have to be walking around with a Frisbee thinking you're driving a car, beeping on your Frisbee, and you say, yeah, that guy was affected by the water. No, it's not like that. The effects of the water can, like I said, organ damage, high blood pressure,
you said developmental issues,
mental issues,
slow learning,
reproductive issues. It impacts males' ability to produce the right amount of sperm count. I mean, there's all kinds of things that occur when you're drinking the water, especially when you're just drinking it from the tap, and you're not just concerned about the amount of lead that you're drinking. And even if the amount of lead that is in the water that you're drinking is below the suggested recommendation by EPA of let's say 10 parts per billion, and you're drinking maybe 5-7 parts per billion of water, or cooking with 5-7 parts per billion of lead in the water, you're still looking at, for example, in cooking, water that has lead can produce the amount of lead that one would see in a penny-sized paint chip. So you're eating macaroni and cheese along with a penny-sized paint chip of lead.
You're right. It's seasoned with lead.
Exactly. And you're ingesting that constantly. And as you're ingesting it, it stays in your blood. It accumulates in the blood. And then, like I said, lead doesn't leave the body. It eventually winds up harboring itself in your bone and your tissues. If you want to look it up, you can look up Google images and say lead in bones, and you'll see all these x-rays and all this stuff where the lead likes to hide. It likes to hide, it likes to hide in the knee. Oh, I got knee problems. It likes to hide in the elbow. Oh, I got elbow problems. It just And so, sometimes I just think they got impacted by lead too when they start thinking that way. That's the mentality. It again, it lead affects the areas of the brain that have reason, that have logic, behavioral. It just you don't have to be walking around with a frisbee acting like you're driving a car. It's more than that. And that's what a lot of people think. Oh, if they're slow, if they have this kind of issue that makes them look like they have real problems. Like
Yeah,
needing to
what
go
you say.
needing to go in the small bus instead of the big bus. That's that, that's not a
That's not
real
it, man. That's not it.
indicator
No.
of lead
Yeah,
health
yeah.
problem.
That's not how lead presents itself, man. That's
Exactly. And there's a lot of people that actually think that way. And it just makes me think, wow, we got a real long way to go on public education on this issue.
and that's why I have you on this show, man. That's why I'm having you on here, because I want you to let people know how important it is to understand just how deep the lead water pipe issue is
Yes.
within the city of Milwaukee, and from a political standpoint, not much has been done.
Not real legislative
real.
actions have been implemented. I
Right.
mean, I'm not going to say they aren't trying. They're doing they're doing the minimum. They could do more. They can do much more. They
Yeah.
can actually have, like the state of Michigan just recently did, have a major filter first campaign. Mandate across the state, mandate across the city. All homes with lead piping are required to have filters at the taps.
How about all homes?
Exactly. Exactly. All homes
All
are
homes.
required. I mean, they're required to have fire alarms, right? You got fire alarm. You got to have a fire alarm in your house.
Yes,
You
you
know,
do. Yes, you do.
and you know, why not have that filter mandated?
Yeah,
The
I'll be down for
responsibility,
that.
the responsibility of maintaining it falls to the people who live in it. But homeowners should be required to keep their water supply filtered in the homes that they rent out. It's just it's a mandate that could easily get approval. And I'll tell you, if we did something as radical as that, I would not doubt seriously that we'd see at least a 35 to 40% drop in crime in our streets in about 10, 15 years. I would not doubt it.
And a better quality of life, health.
And a better quality of life. Yep. Recall the cryptosporidium thing.
Oh yeah, remember that?
Remember that?
I have
And
Yep.
yeah, we lived through that, right?
Yes, sir.
And at the time, they were requiring that they put out an advisory to boil the water. Now, many people at that time, and actually around the time when we first started in 2015, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, I'll just boil the lead out of the water." You can't boil lead out of the water. Lead does not boil out of the water.
If
Lead,
it's in there, it's in there.
lead, when it's in the water, it's in there. Now, all you're doing when you're boiling it is getting it mad. So
Okay.
it gets more toxic. It gets more dangerous.
Really?
Yes. It becomes stronger. And so when you're boiling the water, that's why I said, when you're cooking your food, you're eating a good amount of 0.2 kind of lead there. But
you're eating with angry lead.
That's right, angry lead, exactly. You're not going to boil the lead out. So during that time, we were boiling the water, and nobody was advising the community to use filters while they're doing the boiling. Nobody.
Nope. We just
fast forward from that time to about I think it was like 17, 18 years. And that happened in 93. It was around 2002, 2004. All of a sudden, we started seeing huge spike in crime in Milwaukee.
Mm.
The data's there. The data shows Milwaukee crime had a major spike
Mm.
about 15 years after that cryptosporidium, which if there was an epidemiological study done, the link, that study would surely make it conclusive that lead played a role in that spiking of crime in our community. You know, it just, these people know this stuff. I mean, there's a study that's out now that actually was released 3 years ago by the University of Milwaukee. I forget her last name, professor at the public health school here at UW Milwaukee, where she studied the life of men and women who were in contact with lead well in their childhood, and found the link between gun violence and lead in their bodies. And that study was released, and it shows. There was also a study done by Harvard University and UC Berkeley, combined, the both of them. And those two universities studied over 536 cities, those with lead and those without lead. And cities that had the most amount of lead pipes and had about 46% more crime than cities that did not have lead pipes. So there's a lot of research out there that indicates this is a serious matter that we need as a root cause for a lot of the educational concerns we have and a lot of the street crime that we have, the concerns for that. But they know it. The government knows it. You know, the people in power know this. Again, they rather not spend the money to deal with the root problems our society face. They want to build Wally World on the lake. You know, that's what their focus is, because
Yeah.
they want us to pay for them to profit. They
And in the
want us to.
meantime, we got to deal with this stuff. That's this
Exactly.
unknown chemical.
Exactly. We're dealing with this matter that is affecting the lives of our children and children to be coming,
Yeah.
and they're out here paying attention to when the next pickleball facility is going to get built, and that's where we're going to put our money at.
Hmm.
You know, we got to be, as a community, more engaged and understanding how we're being manipulated and played by these people with power and money. I mean, and what better class room than to be able to watch what's going on in the federal government right now, with all these billionaires in control of the government, and how they're doing everything to try to cut everything that keeps people who are poor alive, that keeps people who are in the middle class staying in the middle class by providing them the support that they need. And these guys cutting all that stuff and getting ready to threaten a lot of lives, millions of lives, because those cuts are basically designed to put millions of dollars back in the pockets of these individuals who already have 5 yachts but want to buy 2 more. You know, it's tremendous manipulation of our society, of our country, of our community, being conducted by the most greediest part of our community. These people who call themselves Christians and who are evangelicals and all this, pushing this kind of mantra, and then at the same time of love and care for humans, they're okay with the United States government pulling U.S. aid and destroying U.S. aid that really showed the Christianity of the country by supporting the world and giving world food and everything, which is the Christian thing to do, right? So if you want to show Christianity as a religion of the people, you don't cut how the food USAID has been helping people around the world. You know,
yeah, yeah.
you know, so but it amazes me how these people just are, and I would have to say that our bodies are so full of toxins that it is impacting the brain waves of a lot of folks, and it's causing a lot of people not to think very logically and reasonably. You know,
Which is why we do. Which is why some people do the dumb things that they do.
exactly,
Yes, sir.
exactly,
Robert
exactly.
Miranda, I really appreciate you taking this time to come in and talk to me, man, and share your knowledge and your wealth of knowledge about this issue.
Yeah,
Because
my wolf too.
brother, I appreciate you, man, and I've learned some things from this conversation too. That we really need to do more as a community to really push the government to act on getting this issue taken care of, because people are getting sick and they don't even know it.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
affecting, like you say, it's affecting our brains and body parts, and nobody's we don't know. We really are
We really
with
right.
it.
Our people are not being told where to go get the information. It's there. It's there. All you have to do is look for it and read it. You know, see for yourself. Read what and I suggest that people pay attention to these studies that are peer reviewed, because each study that comes out has to pass the mustard with the peers of that study, and for all of them to agree this study is fact-based, this study is true, this is the real answer to the problem that we're facing. And so if the study is peer-reviewed, that's hardcore truth. There's nothing that can defeat that truth.
Indisputable.
Yep.
Indisputable. Robert Miranda, how can people contact you?
Oh, yeah, they can reach out to me by, if they see me on Facebook, just send me a friend request. Or they could go to Get the Lead Out Coalition website. Just Get the Lead Out Coalition, and we have email links and everything there. You can go ahead and reach out to me there.
Robert, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for
friend.
the invitation. I appreciate you,
Thank
brother.
you, brother. And simplify.
Simplify.
Yes, sir.
Bro.
And ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. Please remember, take care of yourselves. It's okay to not be okay, but do something about it. You are not alone in your struggles.
Yep.
That's why you have people like myself here and Brother Robert here hey, we're here for you. All right?
That's right. That's right.
Brother Robert, go home. Enjoy yourself.
Take care, brother.
You too, my brother.
Be safe.
Yes, sir. Yep.